Hello everybody, welcome. Welcome back to the show. I'm going to pick up where we left off last night. Hope you're doing well. I'm Dina. You can call in 709-589-4406. Get the phone out of the case, just in case. Always takes me about a minute to get all my ducks lined up. Quack, quack. Here we go, rock and roll. We got out 4 short videos today. I was going to make around 50 today, and then decided I was going to go down the skidoo instead, because we haven't had the skidoo moved yet. And I'll talk about that later. That was a nightmare. But I made it home. Make some adjustments so that doesn't happen again. The winch works really good. Did we put on the skidoo? Thank goodness for that winch. That's all I could say today. Imagine 150,000 sites of 1-ton bags of radiation topsoil that are at 100,000 atoms a kilogram. In 2019, they had in the 105,000 sites. 105,000 sites of 1-ton bags of radiation, including farmers working in a field, harvesting food rather, for market, right alongside of thousands and thousands of 1-ton bags of radiation topsoil. It's the most surreal thing conceivable. And they're within sight of the nuclear meltdowns in an abandoned town that has been abandoned due to radioactive fallout. We got a bunch of news stories to get through tonight. We got to get through the stuff we didn't do last night. And we might just repeat a couple of 5 or 6 of these, because that's kind of where we left off last night. And I want to keep back on track in order for the rest of the stuff to make sense. Hi everybody, hugs for everybody. I hope you're doing well. I definitely didn't think I was going to be doing a show tonight after the madness I went through today. I'm a sucker for punishment. Did Fukushima contaminate every species worldwide with deadly radioactive fallout? All you can do is laugh about it, right? There's nothing else I can do about it. If I don't laugh about it, I'll lose my mind, right? Fukushima contaminated every species, all 9 million species, and we're one of those species, the human species. Nuclear fallout will engulf Taiwan. People should stay home and immediately take off their clothing and throw it away. When you read the stories, I want you to throw the clothes away and wash yourself 7 or 8, 9, 10 times in the shower. And get rid of the towels and the face cloths that you use. Throw them away too. Because of radiation. Because it's like a banana, right? Fukushima plume model showed 1 million atoms a square meter over the west coast after the reactor explosions. Explosions. And here's one of the explosions. You can actually see the reactor core and the fuel pool getting ejected out of the building. Let's do it again. You see the big chunks? It's really interesting because they stopped the video right there. If you let the video run for another 10 seconds, you'll see the fuel pools and the reactor cores falling back down to Earth right away while the plume keeps rising. And so that's Nippon TV in Japan. They didn't want to show you that part. Rain with 20 million particles, physical particles. These are bigger, way bigger than an atom, and they can make it all the way across the Pacific. And these are thousands of times the size of an atom or more. Well, there's hundreds of millions times bigger than an atom, actually. And so they're particles from the containment, it atomized in aerosol and ionized and radiated. Some of it was in the form of iodine-131. So that's 20 million pulses of energy every second per liter of just the iodine-131. There's 10 times more 132 for every iodine-131, 30 times more iodine-133 for every 31, 31 times more iodine-129. But 11 atoms of cesium, for instance, you start to see heart problems for children. 11. So you got 1 million atoms in one study. You got 20 million atoms in another study. What's the odds your children have been consuming way more than 11 atoms a kilogram? Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 atoms a kilogram. And irreversible lesions for adults and big animals with 50 atoms a kilogram of cesium-137. Cesium-137 pulses energy 600 feet every second. The children used to be 1 in a million. Now it was 13,646 out of 38,000, which is 358,000 out of a million when you scale it up. 358,000 out of a million children, when it used to be 1 in a million pre-Fukushima. And then the tumors are about 2 centimeters, and children's thyroid is only about 2 centimeters. I just want to do some math on that because sometimes I doubt myself. And lately I've been planning on doing the math, so I'll show it to you in a second. 468. Yes, 38,000. So 13,646 plus 24,468 is 38,114. So I always say 38,000, and that's close enough, right? When it used to be 1 in a million. Actually, we haven't played that clip. We haven't played that for a few weeks. And I don't know what the audio is like on this one, so I don't know if I'm supposed to have it high, but I'll fix it.
But there's clear evidence rates have risen. Before the disaster in 2011, the rate of thyroid cancer was between 1 and 2 cases in every million children.
So it was 1 to 2 per million children. Now it's 358,000 of a million if you'd actually done the studies. And because the thyroid tumors of a child, an adult is 3 by 5 centimeters, and a child is around 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters, that means they're going to be producing radioactive hormones for the rest of their life. Man-made anthropogenic radioactive hormones. That is insidious. How is that acceptable, I wonder? How can anybody with a conscience not object to that happening? The world's crazy. The nuclear industry is worse, though. They're completely out of control. They've always been out of control. They've never been held accountable for anything, so they've become more bold and more... We'll just leave the rough stuff out of here tonight, hopefully. Radiation data from Seattle area survey may be withheld by the feds for national security. So, but you didn't give them the authority, the monetary, the education, the equipment to wait for all these decades for an accident, and when it finally happens, to not tell you. The ultimate betrayal, because they have a lot of nuclear, dependent upon nuclear for energy, but only because the population not as aware of the harm that's going on. That every nuclear power plant on top of that is surrounded by farms as far as you can see. So you had 20 million particles, which is way worse than a single atom, of iodine-131 per liter. And you would have 31 times typically more iodine-129 with a 15 million year half-life. but you would have 10 times more of iodine-131 in the same sample. So you had 20 million particles. You did of iodine-131. You would have had 10 times more of iodine-132, 30 times more iodine-133, and 31 times more in the same sample of the and these were separate studies. And the iodine-132, 133 is 9 times more effective than the 131 is, which is incredibly effective at ionizing and radiating the thyroid glands of every species and every human. It's brutally effective. And 132, 133 is 9 times more worse. So you're talking about enough, just in iodine alone, to destroy the thyroid glands of every species on the planet in increments over a few decades. And the repercussions is sterilization for the species. And this is just one of many factors. There's a bunch of studies on the sulfur peroxide, hydrogen buckyballs. These are hot particles in the sulfur per cubic meter air detected in California. Let's just move a little further down the line here. 40 million atoms of iodine-131, a single bed of kelp off Southern California, Radiation precautions for the areas near Seattle, Vancouver, British Columbia, Portland. Perhaps you need to wash your shoes and other things. No, you don't wash radiation off your shoes, you throw your shoes away. And your socks and the clothes you're wearing and shave your head, right? And any children's toys you have out in the garden, you throw them away. TEPCO's done nothing. You send it to the nuclear industry and tell them to get it in the dump. Don't throw it away into your local garbage landfills. Send it to the nuclear industry that created it. TEPCO's done nothing for over 2 years to stop highly radioactive Fukushima leak. It's not a leak. The radioactive fallout blanketed the entire planet, and brutal blanket of it covering all of Japan and North America. It's not a leak. And I reject the word leak when it comes to nuclear meltdowns. It's despicable to use that word, because grammar is a weapon, right? Water above a sievert per hour. It was 2.2 sieverts per liter in the tanks. So it wasn't water above a sievert per hour going into the ocean. Nothing has been done to this day because of the difficulties involved. Well, the homeless don't know what they're doing, because that's who's working there, not nuclear scientists or something. Congenital heart disease operations rose 14% after Fukushima. This was per 100,000 live births, 14.2%. 14,200 children needed open heart surgery to correct congenital malformations, like the hole in the heart, which gives you incredible debilitating illnesses as the child starts to get a couple years old. Japan will lose its grip on the country's fiercely guarded rice stockpile as prices soar to their highest level ever. These are all the communities that are growing their food in, by the way. And the second line over here is the population. And then the third line is the physical atoms of just cesium-137. And you can't have cesium-137 without 100 times more strontium-90, for instance. And the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod is curium isotopes, which needs lead shielding 20 times thicker than plutonium, lead shielding. You can't have any of it without plutonium uranium. Plutonium being named after the devil kills all the animals in all the studies. So they're growing food in an actual nuclear wasteland. When I say they're growing food in a nuclear wasteland, this food, stunning numbers, that the storage, what is it, 50 million pounds from Fukushima prefecture? Man, these are literally the craziest times you can live in, that we're being poisoned on purpose, heavily poisoned, brutally attacked with radiation in our food supply. Brutal attack. It's a brutal attack. Radiation sickness is the most brutal sicknesses you can get. It's a permanent disability. And it sucks the life out of every species out there. It eventually sterilizes everything. Average disposition density of cesium-137 on soil. Look at all these towns is absurd. And that's where they're getting the race to. The 3 major polluted prefectures is where they're getting the storage. There's more than that. There's 14 prefectures are brutally polluted. The whole country is, and North America, Canada, United States. But imagine ground zero, where your rice stockpile is made up of the heaviest contaminated prefectures. Think about how insidious and monstrous and despicable and disgusting and revolting and creepy to do something like that. How is this excusable, right? It's not malfeasance, it's Machiavellian. So you got all these communities, those populations in the nuclear wasteland, and they're growing food in the nuclear wasteland. You can't grow food anywhere in the nuclear wasteland without it becoming incredibly radioactive. It simply doesn't work. And they can tell all the lies and all the fake studies they want, but the reality of it is there's a million studies out there to counteract their fake studies. This is how they quantify it. They'll get one of their goblins to do a study saying it's safe, and then they'll use that particular study when there's tens of thousands for each one that they do. Imagine leaving people in these nuclear wastelands. What kind of barbarian culture does that? It's not a culture that does that. It's pure evil to leave people in these nuclear wastelands. High rice prices in Japan because they got the most tourists pre and post Fukushima in their history in a single year, and that's who they're feeding all the radioactive food to. How is that not evil? How is that acceptable? How is that not worthy of fighting back against? I don't regret a single day of this work that I do. Ever. I regret the days I don't do the work, and that's pretty rare. I'm pretty busted up. Even when I'm busted up, I'll work. The other day when I was so bad I couldn't do work, I went into the archives and I dug up over 400 headlines from 2011. 400 headlines. And all I'd done was save the URL. I can't wait to get to that stuff. I got 5 shows ready to go. But we still got to get rid of the show from last night and the stuff from the day, or the last 2 days, which is a light show compared to a typical shows that we're doing. And I got a story coming up where they actually acknowledge where they got that rice to. It's the 3 most contaminated prefectures. And most of it's coming from the nuclear wasteland itself, the no-go zone. How the hell did we ever get to this stage where that was conceivable? How did the International Atomic Energy Agency get to the point where they're so evil that they that's who orchestrated all this carnage on top of that? Like, why would you build the reactors on top of that right alongside of the tectonic plates? Well, how could that be a good idea? Where you got thousands of earthquakes a year and massive ones, and a legacy of tsunamis over 300 feet high. So you knew at some point that was going to happen, sooner than later on top of that. And you built it right in the scope of the tectonic plates. You built it right on the plates. They're not idiots. They're very intelligent people that are doing it. They're incredible educations. Just astounding educations. And they take they're cowards in every sense of the word, but they take great pleasure in what they're doing. In the monstrosity of poisoning every species on the planet. They actually take pleasure in it. They feel good about it. And they work really hard to stop the world from finding out about it. And the evilness is built into them, eh? So look at all these communities, though. That's where they're growing the food. And that line right there, the third line from your left, from over, that's the communities over there. The next one is population, and this one is the just cesium. The majority of the narrative that they're using is based on cesium only, as if no other isotopes exist. And they're desperate to keep that narrative alive. Government data, the United States was hit with worse fallout the year after Fukushima began. That the radioactive cesium spiked to record highest levels ever recorded in history of the EPA's radiation network. The cesium, again you hear the word cesium, which is nasty, don't get me wrong, it was horrifying. I mean, the French study from the French government itself was 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air. That is the most frightening, the most terrifying statement conceivable, the most terrifying reality conceivable. Because cesium-137 pulses energy almost at the speed of light, 600 feet every second. It's never going to go away, because it's going to, whatever you find in cesium, you're going to find infinitely more in curium isotopes. I'm surprised you can even, like, why are they so freaking evil? Billions of pieces, physical pieces that are, and the problem with the pieces is they're splitting atoms forever. Billions of pieces of Fukushima nuclear fuel have spread pretty much everywhere. It's truly frightening. And wherever there's cesium, there's plutonium and americium and neptunium, strontium and krypton and xenon. And the atomic bomb had 1 pound of uranium. Fukushima had hundreds of tons. Fukushima, just a common spent fuel pool could have been 11 million pounds. The top of each of the buildings is around 6 million pounds. Not hundreds of tons, but 6 million pounds at the top of each of the 4 reactors is gone. 4 decades of reactor cores are gone at each of those 4 buildings, rather. 8 fuel pools. Abundant quantities of plutonium are being found in all of these communities, too, where they're growing the food. They're literally insane. And see this yellow section? The yellow section, the white section, is where they move people back into their homes in the nuclear wastelands, like actual, holy shit, wastelands where no one's supposed to be ever, because there's no insects, no birds, no nothing in that first year. And they're actually moving people back in. They're not allowed to get out of their car till they get to their house. And then they have to go in the house and not allowed to go outdoors. Not allowed to cross the street. Got to keep your windows shut. But it's meant to trick you into thinking that these places are not dangerous anymore. But when you look at what's really going on, all you see is monsters. Monsters, rather, I should say. And they deserve to be challenged. And that's what we do here. We challenge their lies and their deceit and their evilness. We got to come up with a word for it, because it's much worse than evil, what we're talking about. Evil would be cool compared to what they're doing. Radiation levels on the U.S. West Coast spiked to 1 million times normal. It was 1 million to 10 million times. This is a French government. That model is only based on 8 days of radioactive fallout. It's covering Canada and the United States right away. And so by day 20, the whole planet was covered. By day 30, it was just this invisible plume covering, like an invisible snowstorm of radiation fallout covering the entire planet, from the bottom of the ocean floor to the upper troposphere. Hateful, evil, and on purpose. And he made it worse. Every way you can think of it, by spraying salt water on it. Every gallon of it is atomized in aerosol and ionized and radiated and released back into the environment as a perpetual nightmare. See, like, they want you to get caught in this paradigm of how much fuel is melting down, right? But when something burns at 9,000 degrees, it's consuming everything around it. It's atomizing and aerosoling and ionizing and radiating it. It's like setting off 5 nuclear weapons a day, every day, in radioactive fallout released into the environment. And so when they were spraying salt water desperately on these enormous temperatures, that stuff was immediately converted into poison and released back into the environment as a gas. And the amount we're talking about is catastrophic. to everybody in every species. There's 10 billion snow crabs missing, vanished. Not missing, but were exterminated through the radioactive fallout process. Because they're bottom feeders. A lot of the radiation ends up on the bottom of the ocean, right? The phytoplankton that sinks down is heavily radiated. And then the crabs are living right in that environment getting irradiated, but they're eating everything big enough they can eat. And they just stopped reproducing is what happened. And because they're such prolific producers, they're one of the last of the bottom feeders to disappear. I mean, that's a stunning number. And the number we're talking about is, we're talking about 4 times more than the entire harvest by humans of crabs, of snow crabs. We're talking, are gone now, permanent. So that's the end of that industry. It can't ever recover because radiation doesn't let nothing recover. There's no recovery from radiation. That's the world. At some point, will wake up. It'll be too late, but they'll wake up, and it's going to be worse than an industry. I can guarantee you. The longer they wait, and there's so many people on this planet, we would have come up with some decent solutions, but there was no urgency. They hid it all from us. Hidden NOAA animation shows ocean all along the United States west coast was contaminated with Fukushima cesium by the end of March 2011. That's that model right there. But remember, the airborne plumes, covered the planet typically in just a fraction, in 20 days or so. So, which is what they're talking about, right? The end of March, because it happened on the 11th, so the end of March is about 20 days. That's the ocean version. That's the NOAA's. That was hid away for about 5 years before it got leaked online and then confirmed. This was a Neptunium-239 dispersal based on 20 days, covering the entire planet. And there's many models of the ocean besides NOAA, by the way. This was a German model. Fukushima release was so great that the radioactive aerosols in Washington were up 100,000 times normal. I really miss Stephen Young, you know. Such a great guy. All those years, he emailed all the senators and Congress people. He was an outstanding person, I can tell you that. He was a good friend for a very long time to this movement, I can tell you that too. Fukushima release is so great that the radioactive aerosols, radioactive fallout, not aerosols, but radioactive fallout. You can call it aerosols, but when it's 5,500 miles away, you should call it radioactive fallout as far as I'm concerned. In Washington, we're up to 100,000 times normal. There is no normal. Hey, let's go eat some food from a nuclear wasteland. Yay, because people got suits and dresses on. There you go. Now, that gives me great confidence. I got Yuchi Bori right there in the center, this tall, skinny creep. He's a despicable human, eh? What he done just after Fukushima, if anybody deserves to be in the Hague and crimes against humanity, he's one of them. Government expert, astounding levels of radiation measured in the United States from Fukushima. 500,000 times the normal levels post-nuclear fallout. We've never seen anything even close to our concentrations. It went up day after day after day, every day. It's amazing to see this 7,000 kilometers away. It's a matter of life and death. Well, it was worse than that. And that took until 2015 before that came out. Radioactive iodine-131 Pennsylvania rainwater samples is 3,300% above the federal drinking water standards. I really despise them for using iodine all the time, because there was all these other isotopes that were much more scary. Iodine's brutal, don't get me wrong. So is cesium, brutal. The biggest byproduct is curium isotopes, not iodine, not cesium. 18,000% above the federal drinking water standards in San Francisco. So it's in Pennsylvania, it's in San Francisco. These are quantified. Radioactive rain caused 130 schools in Korea to close. They closed, same thing in Taiwan, right? And Taiwan is the pro-nuclear as you can get. Another study on the radioactive sulfur peroxide, hydrogen buckyballs. These are all hot particles. The sulfur from the salt water they're spraying on the reactors. Besides, the radioactive sulfur is brutal, by the way. But it creates these spherical balls at these high temperatures. And now it can also ingest uranium, plutonium, whatever, isotopes, and be super hot particles. They're very mobile. They can travel right around the whole planet without the jet streams. And they're a curse upon everything with replicating cells forever. They'll be there long after the human experience. Xenon-133 in Washington, 450,000 times above detectional levels after Fukushima, persisted for weeks. They're talking about, it was a continuous plume of Xenon-133. I actually got the model there. I got quite a few models. This one here is Xenon-133. Think about a visible snowstorm covering the whole planet. Pulsing energy at the speed of light. This has been going on for 80 years, by the way. But Fukushima was a pulse event. So basically what we're talking about is global warming, right? We're talking about climate change. That's what radioactive fallout is. It's an invisible snowstorm, 19 days right there, covering the entire planet forever. Pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second. It's a disgusting, coward industry, right? The people that work there are cowards. Japan Miyagi Prefecture holds a Miyagi Ambassadors Summit with officials from 11 countries and regions. Miyagi, of course, is a massive nuclear wasteland. We are committed not only to rebuilding the agricultural, forest, and fishery industries and reconstructing the tourist industry, rebuilding the agricultural and nuclear wasteland. We are committed to rebuilding the agricultural industry and the nuclear wasteland. These are not words that are normal. These are not words you should ever hear. This is not something in a normal world would be allowed to happen under any circumstances. This industry, the nuclear industry now, because it's never been held accountable for 80 years, it becomes so emboldened with itself that it just now it hates us. And it's nothing but contempt for us. It's still clever enough to try to hide it, but they don't really care in the nuclear industry. It's like a big game for them anyway, right? Like the contempt they have for us is absolute. And because this is the most deadly stuff in human history, radioactive fallout is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. And when you inhale it, it increases the exposure by a factor of 1 trillion. It's in your body, pulsing energy almost at the speed of light in every direction, every second. And wrecking your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells, your body got to try to repair that every second and attack the source and build a tumor around it eventually. Not that that'll fix it, because now you got a tumor. It's still going to be pulsing energy every second. The tumor will get bigger, right? So which is really interesting because you go to the hospital, they give you radiation to reduce the tumor, but it doesn't work that way. The reason you got the tumor was because you got radiation fallout in your body from a million different ways, because they've been releasing it directly into the environment from all the fuel pools legally that are splitting atoms. The reactors are still splitting atoms, they're just not in the reactor core anymore. And most of the nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. As far as you can see, if you got a satellite, it's as far as you can see. It's on purpose. It's the most worthy subject on the planet. They deserve your contempt the most of every evilness on this planet. The nuclear industry should be at the very top of your list of scumbags. They're at mine, I can tell you that much. And there's no way they're going to move off that top list. We are committed not only to rebuilding the agriculture. These are nightmarish words. Miyagi governor of a nuclear wasteland. On behalf of the people of the nuclear wasteland, I would like to express my sincere gratitude. This is demented stuff. Miyagi governor. So Miyagi residents in 2013 filed claims for radiation exposures. A multitude of food products and soils have been showing as considerably contaminated in the area, and rice in the area was found to double the government's radiation limits in 2012. Rice in Miyagi found double the radiation limits. Rice grown on a farm last year, 2012, was found to contain 240 atoms a kilogram of cesium. Again, you hear the word cesium. And cesium counters are very unpredictable. They're not very good at reading it anyway, right? They're not being checked in the best institutions, at the national laboratories or something. The majority of this type of stuff, the farmer is given a crappy Geiger counter that barely works or appears to work. And they're told that if they get any higher than the limit that they have allegedly set, to mix it with other rice that is not as radioactive before you ship it to market. It's volunteer to check it. They're actual degenerate monsters. We got to come up with a word for it. That's the problem, because they're so evil. We don't have a way of describing this type of evil. Miyagi, contamination rampant in Miyagi Prefecture. And this is why the Miyagi governors are meeting to try to eke out a living for themselves and suck in as many vulnerable and complacent people as they can. The Speedy was a system to record that models radioactive fallout. And they had done 5,500 models in the first month. Wrap your mind around that statement. But they didn't release it to the public. They gave it to the American military. But the public who paid for it and created it, they didn't get to see it. There's no, like, the people that says they're a government are simply insane monsters. You didn't hire any of these monsters to do the things they're doing. You hired them to do a job and not to trade and sell you out and not to harm you. Speedy records released this year show considerable radioactive plumes, is what I should say, and disposition over the Miyagi Prefecture around March the 20th. It never stopped. The reactors never stopped melting down. The plume covered, like, to suggest that there was a plume there on March the 20th is the most batshit statement imaginable. All the studies are shown. This is the French study based on 30 days. That's Japan, where it's coming out. You're at day 10. So day 10, Japan is brutal. But day 12, 14, now 15. By the time you get up to day 20, Japan, which is the ground zero, and the entire planet is buried. This is the French government model based on a study of 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air. So if you're on this planet, that's what you were breathing in, and that's what you were drinking, and that's what your food has been contaminated with. And that's what every tree and bird and insect, and that's why you're not cleaning the insects off your windshields in the summertime anymore. You sterilized everything on the planet. The most vulnerable species right away, but everybody else will be following. This is just absurd. And every study we look at, this is the same type of model from every different governments and countries. It's never too late to fight back. It's never too late to hold them accountable for destroying humanity and the species on purpose. It's on purpose. Let me see. Yet the official air reading Miyagi Prefecture shows incredibly low levels of contamination. Well, it's true for the whole country. But there was original numbers come out. I'll take you through some of them actually coming up in a little bit. Speedy records released this year show considerable radioactive plume disposition over the Miyagi Prefecture around March the 20th. But it wasn't March the 20th. It was March the 14th and 15th and forever after. It was prepared. Once you get radioactive fallout, it's permanent. It assimilates in everything out there. Everything with replicating cells is its target. Miyagi Prefecture monitoring equipment is 80 meters, 240 feet off the ground, 240 feet up in the top of a building, 240 feet up in the air. We've been able to confirm that is accurate. The monitoring posts Miyagi are at varying heights off the ground, including one of whopping 80 meters, 240 feet off the ground, 24 stories up in the air. It sits on a government's building roof. They don't tell you where it's to normally. They just tell you what the numbers they got is. And they got the numbers from 240 feet up in the air. These are monsters. These are not complacent dummies. These incredibly educated, articulated, and wealthy monsters. Children from Miyagi Prefecture were scanned for thyroid tumors and found to have 18.75% rate. This is compared to over 30% rate for the children in Fukushima. It was just 36%, 35.6%. Would be 356,000 out of a million, right? So 18.75% would be 187,000 out of a million Miyagi Prefecture if you tested all the children. Tumors on their thyroids, which means permanent radioactive hormones. And if you got permanent radioactive hormones, you got permanent radioactive stem cells. And so when you're developing and you're dependent upon hormones, you're dependent upon stem cells, and they're contaminated permanently and producing radioactive stem cells, radioactive hormones, then the amount of health problems, because it's not just cancer. The disgusting industry will tell you, cancer. Well, we're not seeing a cancer. Well, how about heart problems, liver problems, lung problems? Like the first studies they do after a nuclear meltdown on a continental scale is going to be autism and Down syndrome for the pregnant women, because that'll show up right away. Of high radiation were found in Miyagi, Iwate, Guma, alongside Tokyo, even Tokyo, Tochigi, Tokyo. Prefectures with mandatory areas. Miyagi certainly one of them, right? Like Koriyama is a nightmare place to live. It's 35 miles away. So is Fukushima City. These are nightmare places. We got a study showing not a single organism in the Fukushima Prefecture is not incredibly radioactive. And that the excrements from the worms was at 1.4 million atoms per kilogram. And worms do shit a lot, right? Japan's Miyagi Prefecture holds a Miyagi Ambassador Summit. These are not ambassadors. These are bastards. These are monsters. They want to what? Revitalize an agricultural industry in a nuclear wasteland. Yeah, wait a couple of million years. You disgusting maggots. Government model shows the west coast of North America to get the highest levels of Fukushima contamination until 2030s. Well, once it's there forever on top of it. It's not like, what they're talking about is it's going to continue to come in heavy doses, heavy plumes, until at least the 2030s, 2040s. There's no science on this stuff, right? And if you look at the actual reality of it, you're talking about at least 50 to 60 years of heavy emissions from the ongoing never-ending nuclear meltdowns. Japan rice prices hit a record high. Japan says the air 150 kilometers from Fukushima plant is radioactive as areas close to the meltdown. High levels of radioactivity found extensively. Well, that means it's contaminated forever. You can't mitigate it. You picked up 30 million one-ton bags, which was only 3% of the farmlands and the communities where they were manipulating people to move back into, so they can justify being keeping nuclear alive for a bit longer. I mean, the World Nuclear Association and the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, UNSCLEAR, ERPA, the IPRC, and the rest of these are all United Nations entities, by the way. And of course, Japan is the third biggest donor to the International Atomic Energy Agency. Japan rice prices hit a record high. The average per 5 kilograms at about 1,000 supermarkets nationwide climbed to a record of around $24 for the week through January 26, 2025. That's up 79% from the same period last year. That's because they brought in 34 million tourists last year. And they fed them all the most radioactive food they can give them. Get rid of it. Not that you can get rid of it. Every prefecture is producing around £1 billion in the nuclear wasteland. There's 14 prefectures. The food was banned in 14 prefectures by 55 countries for a decade because they're nuclear wastelands. They got rid of the people that had done that, and then the next administrations removed restrictions because they were pro-nuclear, and that's the only reason they were appointed those positions, right? Rice producers and wholesalers in Japan expect prices from the staple to remain high. It's just heartbreaking. Japan's agricultural minister says rice from stockpile reserves for emergency use were sold swiftly. Yeah, because they're taking millions of pounds out of the most radioactive prefectures and putting it into storage because you can't sell it. And then when there's a shortage, then they pump it out there. It's just heartbreaking to see that a group known as the nuclear industry is willing to destroy every species and every human on the planet, and all the fresh water, all the salt water, and water is life. Water in many ways is a god. It touches all of us. It's in all of us all the time. We're excreting it. We're taking it in all the time. And water is life. Like a typical glass of ocean water used to be 1 billion creatures per glass, a single glass of water. That's a soup of life. It's the eggs, the larvae, the small fries of 1 billion creatures. The ministry eased its policy last month so it can sell the reserves in response to concerns about rice distribution. Before that, the government had released the stockpile only in response to extremely poor harvest or disasters. And this would be the first release of stockpiled rice aimed at ensuring smooth distribution. Well, we've got the headlines of them releasing the stockpiles 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016. Just because they say it in a story, it doesn't mean it's true. It's most likely not going to be true. That's the problem. That's why we do these shows, is because we challenge the lies with some reality. CC-137 immediately damaged the heart muscles. This is why you're seeing 14,200 children out of 100,000 born across the entire country need open heart surgery. It's also the reason why you're seeing the death rates from cardiac diseases might give the creeps to some people. Everybody but the nuclear industry, I would imagine. The numbers of deaths was up 12.5%, 12,700, compared to the same month of the year before. Not year, but month. An extra 12,700 people in a single month died of heart attacks. Not talking about, because it's not just heart problems. There's liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. And there's not one of you out there can tell me that you're not seeing a massive increase in dementia. You're not seeing a massive increase in autism and Down syndrome and diabetes, etc., heart problems, liver problems, lung problems. Like, I would look at nuclear fallout, particularly from that pulse event from Fukushima, because it distributed it so quickly, so readily. So science outweighs irrational reasoning. This is Young Jong-il, the author is a professor at the Department of Nuclear and Quantum Engineering in South Korea. One of the most prestigious places there, CAST, known as CAST. He said about Fukushima that the 1,000 tanks had 2.2 grams of tritium. This is a professor of nuclear and quantum engineering, by the way. He also says that if you discharged everything into the ocean, it's the equivalent of throwing 3 grams of sugar into the ocean. Like, so many things wrong with that statement. He's a professor of nuclear and quantum engineering, and he doesn't hesitate to cut everybody's throat. Just bear with me here. Like, I'll never understand why they hate everybody so much. But I can tell you right now they do. And it's hard to appreciate what this kind of hate can do to a population. So he says nothing, it'd be equal to 3 grams of sugar. It wasn't equal to 3 grams of sugar. The French says Japan's lost control, the French will leave the country. There's 1,500 tons of highly radioactive sludge. This is sediment. 50,000 one-ton bags of sediment from the water filtration facilities. It was so radioactive they couldn't get rid of it. But a professor of nuclear quantum engineering says it's like 3 grams of sugar. They found plutonium in every sample. In every sample. Just bear with me, I screwed up here. It's always that way with data. A little too quick on the dial. I'm actually, tomorrow or the next day, well, the next time it goes out, which who knows when that'll be, like to a shop, I'm going to buy 2 new mouses. The very next time, that's number one on my priority right now. It's such a nightmare. These mouses got me tortured. What have I got done? Bear with me. I'll get there. I screwed up. Because I got 10 windows on each side. And they might have like 10,000 in each window of these screen captures. And so if I accidentally click the wrong way or the mouse, because the mouse is a pain, what ends up happening is I can jump to another pane, and then it takes a while for everything to repopulate, or just to find your spot because you got so much. Now the main window, I keep it down. So I'm supposed to take a screen capture of that so I can poke the beast later. Okay, so we're going across Japan. The garbage is so radioactive, can't get rid of it. The sediment from the water filtration is so radioactive, can't get rid of it. The ashes from the incinerators across the whole country is so radioactive, you can't get rid of it. And they're grinding up the heavy radioactive materials in Fukushima Prefecture, shipping to other prefectures and burning it in the local incinerators. Is the government trying to contaminate every region of Japan by burning the radioactive debris? If everyone is contaminated, in a sense, nobody is. Incinerating radioactive material contaminate the environment. Fukushima plant will burn radioactive waste, and the plant, the nuclear meltdown site, they have 2 incinerators now. They built a huge one there. They also had 18 special built 9-story incinerators in the prefecture to burn radioactive branches and debris and everything. And the biggest problem now is trying to disassemble the incredibly radioactive incinerators. And because you can't destroy radiation by doing it, you're just going to liberate it back into the environment. It's the worst thing you could do. That's the route they're always taking. The road they're always on is the worst thing you can do. That's what they're going to do every single time. And we're 13 years down the road. We don't have the big like Greenpeace and the rest of them involved in this conversation or fighting back. There's nobody fighting back. There's like a handful of us, 5 or 6 people. That's it worldwide. Iodine-131 rises 350 kilometers from the plant, suggesting a criticality is still ongoing. Japan burns radioactive debris 10 miles away in Adani, most likely. Severe impact on the oceanic environment, unpredictable amount of damage to the Pacific. Japan is simply dumping the nuclear waste into the ocean. And the tanks are empty, by the way. If you fill up the tanks with the material we're talking about, 2.2 sieverts per liter, you're talking about 1.4 million sieverts. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose to somebody, just walking past it. 1.4 million means you can't build another tank on the site and you can't get back on the site. So they can't put it in the tanks. You can't filter it because now the filter is so radioactive you can never get in the filter building after 20 minutes ever again. Massive radioactive buildup in Tokyo suburbs, which is 36 million metropolitan Tokyo. Tokyo officials blast the parents who want their kids to avoid eating and ingesting and breathing and drinking radioactivity at schools. Tokyo neighbors cesium approaching levels found in Fukushima. The incinerator dust, because like they're going to burn 95% of the, so if you put cardboard in, 95% of it or more will burn up, right? And only 3, 4, 5% is left over in ashes. And so they're at in a nightmarish 70,000 atoms a kilogram, and they're only talking acknowledging cesium. High levels of cesium isotopes are cropping up at dust at 42 incinerators in 7 prefectures. It's the equivalent of taking fuel rods out and burning them on the side of the road every day for decades. It's the most nightmarish thing you can do. So the radioactive waste in the bags is 100,000 atoms a kilogram. You have 1 billion pounds of just radioactive debris you want to get. Mysterious substances at 1 million becquerels a kilogram of cesium in minimasoma. But according to the big shot professors from nuclear and quantum engineering in South Korea, is equal to 3 grams of sugar. So this person should lose their job and their degrees. 10 million atoms a kilogram of cesium in minimasoma soil samples. It's over, right? Possibly 20 million. And we're not acknowledging cesium because nothing else comes out of a nuclear meltdown, please. Japan government did not reveal plutonium-241 detections, and the radiation dose was 50 times higher than the total of the 3 other plutonium isotopes. So 50 times higher. Not 50% higher, but 50 times higher. And plutonium, of course, is named after the devil, killed all the animals with at least 3 tumors. The skeleton tumor was the most prolific way to die. The most brutal way on top of that, isn't it? Mysterious black substance is not yet measured, possibly 20 million atoms a kilogram of cesium, many times more radioactive than local official samples. It's too dangerous, must be analyzed by the public, or by the public institutions. No, I mean, just get out of Dodge. If you find out in your community, you leave. And you don't stop till you're at least 1,000 miles away. Because it would indicate that the entire environment is going to be similar. Like, you might think, those out there might think that you can survive in this environment, but there's so many issues, so many health problems that'll keep. It will destroy your quality of life right away, and then it'll destroy you and your loved ones and your most vulnerable, your children and your elderly, the people you should covet. 50,000 atoms a kilogram radioactive cesium in Tokyo. Right, but no, that's like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine. It tastes like 3 grams of sugar. It was so egregious, we actually done a whole show on this guy. Government-funded researchers have sounded alarm calling for immediate monitoring 1.7 175 billion atoms flow per day in just one river in one city, 60 kilometers from the meltdown. But 175 billion becquerels is jack shit. It's terrible, don't get me wrong, but it's not very much in the scope of what's really going on there. This might be, like, if you put per liter or per cubic meter of water, maybe. I'll agree with that. But to suggest that 1.75 billion atoms is sounding an alarm, then you're not being honest. Right? So it was probably per liter or per cubic meter, 1,000 liters of water at best. And they omitted that, and they just said in the river. And because you got to think about how much a gram of radiation has in it. You got to think about each of the reactor buildings were around 6 million pounds, and that's all gone in 4 buildings. And there's a incredible real possibility that the common span fuel pool with around 11 million pounds was atomized in aerosol too. It was right behind Reactor 4. And they pixelated it out in pictures, 735 pictures that were released on the 10th anniversary, not in January of 2021. Radioactivity of 6.15 million atoms per square meter detected 60 kilometers from the meltdowns. Again, they're typically going to, they're typically going to talk about cesium. So if you got that cesium, you're going to have 30 times more strontium-90, for instance. You're going to have absurd amount more curium isotopes. Every organism in the Fukushima prefecture is contaminated with radiation. 1.4 million atoms a kilogram detected in worm feces 60 kilometers from the meltdown. And so the BQ is the pulse of energy each second, right? So 1.4 million pulses of energy in a kilogram of dirt and feces. But that's just going to be a single isotope that they're acknowledging. That's not going to be the 1,000 isotopes that are actually in that same sample. That's the signature of a certain isotope, typically cesium-137, as you're aware. Yeah, it's cesium, right? As you're aware. Tokyo neighbor dust recovered. 500,000 atoms a kilogram. In order to have a Becquerel, you got to have an atom, pulsing energy. So rather than going with their grammar way of downplaying it, which is confusing for the average person, you call it a physical atom, because that's the appropriate thing to do. 500,000 atoms a kilogram of radioactive cesium found 75 miles from the plant. 4 million atoms in a major city, and didn't come from iodine and cesium. Well, they're going to be there, but they measured a different isotope. Thorium detected 100 kilometers from the meltdowns. The air 150 kilometers from the meltdowns is as radioactive as the area is close to it. 170,000 atoms in your excrements in the sewage. What it is, sewage goes into an area where it's dehydrated. It's not perfectly dehydrated or something like that, but they evaporate away a lot, 3/4 of the liquids. And because, you got water. When you flush your toilet, there's a lot of water too, right? And so then the slag, what they call slag left over, which is the raw sewage, is at 170,000 atoms a kilogram. These are a nightmare. People are excreting that much. These are nightmare numbers. 180 kilometers away, the fallout made it, the fish are no good, the vegetables, the wildlife, nothing is any good anymore. It's too much radiation. 180 kilometers away, alpha particles at 200 counts per minute. In Diachi Elementary, 4 million atoms a kilogram in the soil samples of cesium in Chiba, which is 20 kilometers from Tokyo. These are absurd numbers. No, Dan, it's like 3 grams of sugar. 27,000 atoms a kilogram in the kindergarten, of all places. And instead of moving the kids out of there, they take them 200 kilometers away so they can play somewhere where it's not so radioactive once in a while. They're insane. And the way of dealing with it is lying about it and putting people in the most radioactive areas and closing their eyes, putting their fingers in their ears and saying this is not happening. And Tokyo area turned out to be as contaminated as Fukushima. Tokyo, 270 times, the air samples in Tokyo are 270 times more contaminated with cesium-137 than the global weapons failure peak. Of course, again, like whenever you hear the word cesium-137, you got a picture, there's 1,000 other isotopes you're worried about. It's not just cesium-137. There's a mathematical equation to extrapolate many different isotopes and numbers. And none of them are nice. None of them are cool. Forecast shows Tokyo under radiation threat on Sunday, March the 20th. It's 240 kilometers away. Government simulation shows radioactive plume of Krypton-85 over Tokyo, March the 15th. When Medusa blew up on the 14th, which was Reactor 3, it was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. So reuse plutonium, reuse uranium, which is the stupidest thing you can do. It's not illegal here in Canada, United States, because it's harmless. It's illegal because it's the stupidest thing you can do. And so how do we get this professor fired? Like if I was Greenpeace, I can get this guy fired, right? You just run a campaign down there and you get this guy fired. You got all kinds of people. Oh, you're Greenpeace. Wow, we want to join. But Greenpeace is your enemy. They've done the opposite of what they're supposed to do. And you'll see Greenpeace they'll have donation buttons directly to Greenpeace on all the major medias. And then the media will only refer to them. They won't acknowledge I exist. Because they're not media. They're even worse than the serial killers in your jails. And I'm not going to sit there and take it. I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to pretend it's not happening. I'm going to confront it by running an educational program and beating the shit out of myself all the time. Because why not? They do enough of it to me. I might as well do it to myself once in a while. 300,000 plus atoms per square meter radioactive iodine near Tokyo before the end of March. Only included iodine 131. There's 10 times more 132, 30 times more 133, 31 times more iodine 129. And there's many other iodines you got to worry about. And they're brutal on insects and birds and children and elderly and everybody else. High radiation levels near Tokyo. Rain caused 29 million atoms a square meter in the soil, said the government. These are absurd numbers. So when you got these numbers suggesting that the drinking water is unsafe, this is permanent. It can never be safe after all these numbers I showed you. It can't be safe. It's true about 70% of Japan's territory is polluted. It means everybody should be abandoning it. Expert worried about the catastrophic impacts on the health. So there was descending voices, clearly. Right? That's where this stuff is coming from, descending voices, for the first few years. But then they got fired or kept their mouth shut or whatever it was. But they disappeared and they stopped talking about it. And these were the people because this was a shock to everybody when Fukushima happened. It took a few years to replace everybody with the pro-nuclear community. But they got there. 276,000 atoms a kilogram of radioactive cesium from a soil sample near Tokyo. About 18 million atoms a kilogram square meter. So how much evidence do you need, see? I got it. Trust me. I'll get you the evidence, whatever you need. 300,000 atoms per square meter of radioactive iodine near Tokyo. So if there's iodine, it's going to be saturated, just saturated with everything else. They use iodine because it's got a short half-life, and that's the standard routine for these scumbags to do. Tokyo area soil testing finds radioactivity up to Chernobyl's relocation levels at almost 1 million atoms a square meter in Tokyo. So there's a lot of studies 240 kilometers away of brutal radioactive fallout. Brutal. New York Times government said not interfere in Tokyo. Then came the test results. Well above, way above, 1.5 million atoms per square meter near a church in the capital. So clearly Tokyo should have been abandoned, still shouldn't, will always be. Doctor finds uranium zirconium in the Tokyo residents' fingernails will become nuclear fuel rods. And you couldn't be closer to the truth than that statement, can you? Government simulation shows radioactive plume of Krypton-85 over Tokyo. That was at 450,000 times above detection, what they call detection levels. So it could be, multiple millions per square meter is what we're talking about of Krypton-85. 40,000 microsieverts. These are absurd numbers in a supermarket. Yeah, because everything is radioactive. And where do you take all the radioactive food to? Oh, that's right, the supermarket. Neutron beams observed 13 times from Tokyo. Man. Neutron rays measured in Tokyo. Which you get from uranium-235, found in Chiba, can't be detected by most Geiger counters. That's an inspector, right? What you're looking at right there on the screen. That's what I got up there in the corner. That's an inspector. They're the minimum you want to be using for accuracy. But if you get into heavy radiation, you have to send it back to the factory to get calibrated. People in Tokyo, the black substance is here. This stuff is at tens of millions of atoms per kilogram. It's on the roof, it's on the asphalt, it's on the concrete. It's everywhere on every surface. And then just the dust at 4,000 atoms a kilogram of cesium in the fog. So imagine, how morning dew works, right? You go out in the morning and you got all this moisture on all the plants. And then you're going to eat that food from Japan? You really think that's a good idea? You really think that everybody shouldn't be able to protest in Tokyo and Japan and the nuclear industry every weekend? Because you look, if you had 100 people doing what I'm doing, the industry is over next week. It can't handle 5 people pointing fingers. It loses their minds. It spends $1 billion a year on public relation firms to dumb down the population. That's the only way they can exist is constant propaganda everywhere. And when we do a typical news cycle of the 24-hour news cycle, and we try to challenge every lie in a single story, sometimes you can't do. It could take you 2 hours to do. And I'm pretty fast with pulling up the evidence. I've been at it a long time, but it still takes you up to 2 hours to challenge every lie in a big story. Like if you got a fairly long essay, right, on nuclear from the industry, which is all going to be, and you got to be incredibly articulated, or you got to be incredibly deceptive to write those particular essays. We've covered at least of the long stories, several thousand of them over the last number of years. It's terrifying that the samples were from the side of the street where children walk every day. So what they're suggesting, what they're acknowledging rather, is just walking past stuff like 50,000 atoms a kilogram of cesium in the soil is terrifying for the children that are walking past because they're so low to the ground on top of that. And because they're developing, right? They need their thyroids in good shape, not radioactive. They need their stem cells in good shape, not radioactive. And this is what this stuff is. It attacks everything with replicating cells. It attacks it permanently. And you can't destroy it in incinerators, for instance. Contamination in Tokyo suburb 3 times higher than areas 1 mile from Fukushima. Nuclear scientists, a significant contamination in Tokyo. It's not a problem. It's a nightmare. It's an emergency. It has, pretending it's not happening is the worst option. Japan Prime Minister, there's a lot of stories about this from the major medias over many months. Japan Prime Minister studies setting up an alternative capital away from the nuclear wasteland. Tokyo. And Japan unveils a plan to develop massive government backup city 300 miles west of Tokyo, maybe built That story is November 3rd, 2011. This one is May the 1st, 2011. Local Tokyo official became clear that radiation came further south, we thought, all the way to Tokyo. And while at the nursery school with kids rolling in the dirt and tasting it. Writers obtained a secret Tokyo evacuation scenario. That's February 17, 2012. That's the following year. After those two stories. So that's March the 1st, 2011. May the 1st, 2011. That's November the 3rd, 2011. That's February the 17th, 2012. Talking about moving the capital, the employees, 300 miles away and leaving everybody else behind. Japan Times alarming government report discusses Tokyo exodus and collapse of spent fuel pool 4. Well, Reactor 4 spent fuel pool, which they covered up, 100% was lost, which was decades of reactor cores. And when I say they covered it up, that's exactly what I mean. They covered it up. This is just a fraction of the media, pretending they're 150 feet above that stump. Do you really think they're doing that for kicks? For crackers? Do you really think that there's not an event happening? Have I been able to supply you with enough documentation that you are willing to consider that there's an event happening? That's really the only question I got that you should ask yourself. And if the answer is yes, then you need to get educated, at least to protect yourself and your loved ones, and be able to appreciate what to avoid when you can. You can't avoid everything by no shape or form, unfortunately, because they have destroyed everybody's future in the species. And how do we hold them accountable? See, if I was Greenpeace, I would launch lawsuits against all the journalists that pretended they were at the top of the building. And there's no way I'm settling at a court, and it would be a criminal trial. We want them in jail. We want them to lose their degrees and go to jail. And we want the producers and the editors and the videographers and the owners to go to jail too for paying for that and sanctioning that and not speaking out about that. They're part of the crime, right? And we are pursuing that. That whether they like it or not, whether they can laugh at me all they want, saying this will never happen, we'll never get them, but I guarantee you we'll get them. Listen, I created that picture over 10 years ago. I haven't slowed down. And I only get better every day. Yeah, I get busted up and it takes me a week or more to recover, but I'm pretty good in the recovery. I went out today on the skidoo because I'm stupid. I was making short videos this morning, and I got everything ready, and I made some, and I decided, it's like 1:30. I'm gonna take the skidoo and just go down the road, and I got stuck in a snowdrift, and I had nowhere where to winch to tie onto, and so I had to come up with all kinds of stupid ways to do it. And I was blowing 50 kilometers an hour. I was at the bottom of a pond. And so all the snow was blowing up the pond right on top of me. It was, I learned a bad lesson today. And it took 2.5 hours to winch myself out. But I winched myself out. The skidoo ran perfect. It's sitting there idling the whole time, right? The problem was it's really powerful. It's an 800cc. And that's the first time I used it. And I was a little too hard on the gas. I dug myself in trying to back up. And so I had shit rope with me. Was my biggest problem. And I got rope ran down to me anyway, and then I winched myself out right away. I have 100 foot of 5/8 double braided rope now that was supposed to be on the back of the bike, right? And I'm supposed to have, I got 2.5 foot spikes, steel spikes. I had them made. And they're for nailing. I usually take a 3-pound maul with me, and they're to nail in between the rocks or nail in the dirt or something, ice, and then I can winch myself off of that, right? And so I won't leave ever again without that stuff, I can tell you that much. But when I finally got home today, it was 2.5 hours, and it was just bitter. It was minus 20 or something wind chill, just bitter cold. And it was like being in a blizzard, eh? It was really nasty. So I had to winch myself back a couple of 100 feet before I finally got on some areas that weren't deep snow, because thank goodness for the heavy wind. And I was able to turn around and head back home. And when I got home, I was like, I'm going to sell that. I don't want to see that again. But after about an hour, I started coming back to normal again. But the winch worked. Without the winch, I'd still be there. Well, I would have had to leave everything there without the winch. And that was the only spot in that whole section where there's no trees you can tie onto. And I'm supposed to have the heavy rope with me. I'm supposed to have, and that's why we picked up that sled. And I'm supposed to have a lot of supplies with me in case this happens. Because it's not like a quad where you got 4 wheels and everything is hunky-dory and it's really difficult to get stuck. You're on a skidoo. It's the snow is still a bit soft, right? Anyway, we got snow coming tomorrow night and Friday morning, and then the next day, all day long, little bits of snow. But that accumulates in these miserable temperatures. So I'm not I'm far from giving up yet. It was just I was really tired. 2.5 hours, stood up in snow all the way up to your waist, trying to walk through that stuff. And I realized the snow was getting deep, so I stopped and went to back up and then dug a hole. We welded a winch onto it there a few weeks back, right? Just so in case that happens, because you know it's going to happen. But the thing is, because the skidoo, you should be bringing all kinds of equipment with you. I don't have to take a tent with me when I'm going local or something like that, or sleeping bags, but I should be taking gear with me so that I can just get out of there. I should be taking a shovel with me. I should be taking if I take you can take the 8-pound maul, and you can drive those spikes down into rocks or in the ice, and you just winch yourself back out of it, right? And so it was a lesson for me. I got a little cocky. I decided I was going to go for a little further than I originally planned. I just wanted to go out and give it a try because we haven't drove it yet, right? So I want to go out and take it out and give it a try, make sure everything is hunky-dory. And she sat there idling for almost 3 hours. It was brilliant. Not a hitch in the world. Very quiet. And on the way back, beautiful ride on the way back. And so very impressed with the skidoo, particularly the winch. Not very impressed that I didn't have my heavy rope with me like I should have. And not that I didn't want to use the heavy rope. It was brand new rope. It was still wrapped up, right? I got 100-foot, 5/8 inch, double braided, like a marine rope. This is really nice stuff. For $36, less than half price. So I bought it. I was like, shit, I'm taking that. I was going to use it for anchor line, right? Plus, but then I decided I was going to keep it for emergency uses. Because it's so cheap, you never get a good deal like that very often. It was the only one there, right? I would have bought 2 if I had 2 there. Plus, iodine 132 is 9 times more effective. And same thing with the 133. Radioactive black substance is found 230 kilometers from Fukushima plant. It seems to be everywhere. 230,000 atoms per square meter of cesium in an athlete's field in Koto, which is right by Tokyo, right? 6 times as high as limits set for the radiation control zone. Like if you divide 6 into 230,000, you're still talking about a nuclear wasteland. Like, these people are insane. You got to deal, like, it's too radioactive to put people there, particularly children, my goodness, and women, my goodness. You have to protect the females on this planet from this industry. We're not, if you destroy the female, and they're 4 times more vulnerable than the males. So if you destroy the females, guess what? The species disappear. Of every species. Government session reveals 400,000 times normal radioactive xenon 133 levels in Chiba. The actual figures are much, much higher. Well, that was true in North America, too. It wasn't just Japan. It was incredible amount in Canada, incredible amount in the United States, and worldwide. Newly released Nuclear Regulatory Commission's email revealed radioactive technetium-99 was detected outside of Fukushima, 240 kilometers away. One of the three principal radionuclides identified. It's only because they can find it, see? It's nasty isotope, don't get me wrong, but they can find it, and it's very significant. In order to be created, it means you had a meltdown. Strontium-90, 245 kilometers away from the meltdowns in Yokohama City, 150 times the background. And so it's very offensive to me when you got these professors the esteemed professor from the most prestigious institute in South Korea suggesting that it's like a banana or a potato chip or walking in the sunshine, or it's very disingenuous, right? And so they should lose their degree. They should go. There should be a criminal penalty. They should be in jail for at least 30 years for coming out and lying about something so serious. There's no excuse to lie like that. 24,000 atoms west of Tokyo. A kilogram. That's towards the Noto Peninsula, Ishikawa Prefecture, right? A radioactive cesium in the soil sample is 250 kilometers away. But it's west of Tokyo, so it's towards the Sea of Japan, towards South Korea, towards Russia. Cesium contamination stretches Japan's west coast. 30,000 atoms a square meter in Nagano, 250 kilometers from. And I got a whole file on Nagano. Nasty amount of radiation. So you're way past Tokyo. Absorbed radiation dose of iodine-132 was 10 times higher than the 131. Plus 132 is 9 times more effective at irradiating the thyroid. And then we got stories showing the same thing for 133, which is 30 times more ratio for every iodine-131 produced. And strontium, and these were different ones. Strontium-19, strontium-85, found in 2,200 locations in Fukushima. So it's not surprising Yokohama 250 kilometers away. So you got different studies of different isotopes in the same areas showing incredible numbers. High radiation levels 270 kilometers from the meltdown. And Gunderson is only getting mentioned to get street creds. He's not part of the story. 300 times more radiation released into the atmosphere from burning debris. Because Arnie Gunderson repeatedly lied to us about Reactor 4 and Reactor 3 and Reactor 2 and Reactor 1. Repeatedly. And he worked for a manufacturer that built the racks for the fuel assemblies for 70 identical reactors in the United States. So if he doesn't know the fuel pools are gone, who would? I just despise him. He's a despicable subhuman species after I found that out. I provided the documentations for my assertions. I don't believe in smearing somebody without the documentation to back it up. I just don't believe in it. It's too bad the industry doesn't do that. Look how much they smeared me. It's ridiculous. It's just absurd amount of contempt. I've been attacked nonstop all these years and viciously attacked, targeted. And I'm not a bad person for being honest, okay? I'm not. I'm not a bad person for fighting for everybody on this planet either, and every species on this planet. I'm not a bad person for challenging lies. Because how can I be? Cinnamon tea, man. The stuff is good. It's better when it's cold, almost cold, or even cold. It's like a drink. Like if you filter this out, and I'm only using a tablespoon of this stuff in the tea, right? If you filter it out, so it's just pure liquid, don't drink the stuff in the bottom. But if you filter it out and put ice cubes in it, it'll be a wicked and beautiful cold drink. I'm so busted up from today, man. Barely recovered from the last ordeal. Far from recovering from the last ordeal. I'm just happy every time I can get here and do a show. I'm just grateful every single show. And it seems to always be that way. I'm at my most comfortable when I'm sitting here doing my show. Because nothing better than stabbing the nuclear industry as many days as I can. It really isn't. And what I'm doing tonight, I'm stabbing the shit out of them. Fukushima radioactivity over 40 billion atoms a kilogram. Along the roadside in black puddles of water. These are absurd numbers. 40 billion atoms a kilogram in the water from mud puddles on the side of the road. These are absurd numbers. Remember the story of billions of pieces of fuel spread everywhere? Each piece is pulsing energy on a whole new level of an atom. It's splitting atoms. Each piece of the billions of pieces are out there in an environment splitting atoms. It's truly the worst case scenario. These are perpetual disease machines. It's like, so radiation, fuel and fuel particles and stuff like that are perpetual machines. They're splitting atoms that attack everything with replicating cells every second for billions of years. Well, it could be more insidious than something like that. Hot particles 400 kilometers from Fukushima, radioactivity of 40 billion becquerels a kilogram. That's 400 kilometers away. Hotspot spreading. Government to check radiation up to 460 kilometers from the meltdowns. So what I'm doing is just marching you across Japan from the nuclear meltdown, heading south. We're 600 kilometers from the meltdown. High levels of cesium. There's high levels of cesium. There's high levels of plutonium. High levels of uranium. High levels of strontium. High levels of americium. High levels of curium. High levels of neptunium. High levels of this. High levels of that. You can't just be cesium, because it doesn't work that way. See. New contamination map shows cesium-137 deposited over 900 kilometers from Fukushima, west of Hiroshima. Professor now reveals a high level of radioactive material detected over 1,000 kilometers from Fukushima. High levels 1,000 kilometers away. So what's it going to be like in all those farms where they're growing food, shipping it to your children and your elderly and yourself and your friends and your families and your communities? How can you not be moved by this? Over 30 million tons of nuclear waste in Fukushima alone, possibly from spontaneous combustion. You see smoking mounds of radioactive debris. And they got disgusting Mari Yamaguchi, despicable traitor. Here's what Japan looked like from the radioactive fallout originally. That's a death plume right there, look. Journalists in Japan, Fukushima government is dumping tons of radioactive mud from decontamination into the rivers at night. So yeah, they picked up 30 million one-ton bags, but they dumped 60 million one-ton bags into the rivers and the estuaries and the oceans at nighttime. They're the worst. They done the worst thing in every instance that you could do. They said, well, how can we make it worse? Well, let's burn it. How can we make it worse? Let's dump it into the rivers. How can we make it worse? Let's dump it straight to the ocean. How can we make it worse? Let's feed it to the children. How can we make it worse? That's what they done. For 13 years. What's it going to take for the world to fight back, I wonder? Large amounts of radioactive dust. It blanketed everything. Radioactive dust. And drink that in. Selling radioactive concrete. Houses will be radioactive sooner than we have thought. Japan government prepares to flee Tokyo. August the 10th, 2011. So you had May 2011. Now you have August 2011. You had November 2011. You had March 2012. The government planning to flee. So they were serious about it, right? Mysterious black substance has 1 million atoms a kilogram of cesium all over Minamisoma. New indoor radiation dose records at Fukushima. 5 sieverts per hour at reactor number 1. First off, nobody's going inside of number 1. Exceeded the measuring device's capacity. Exceeded 10 sieverts. That's 10 sieverts is a fatal radiation level. You walk past it, that's a fatal dose. In that environment, that's the fatal dose, right? If you stand there for 10 minutes, what happens to you is your organs will be melting. You'll know something's wrong. You'll try to get away from that area, and eventually you'll collapse 10 minutes down the road, 20 minutes down the road, and your organs have liquefied. Press watches as the government dumps the radioactive waste into Tokyo Bay. Japan considers moving the capital away April 14, 2011. So you have May, April, August, November 2011 stories from different medias. You have March 2012 story. I showed you already tonight on that. Intelligence agencies pressured researchers withhold information on the spread of Fukushima radiation. 12 million yen, which was about $54,000 at that time, to censor Twitter. And so there wasn't very many people to censor, right? About 155,000 just on baseless rumors, what they call baseless rumors. If it was baseless rumors, why don't they let somebody independently test the stuff before they incinerate it? And the worst of it is that this was a single city. And right, they closed down my Twitter account at that time too, right? It wasn't censoring, it was just getting rid of any dissenting voices that were trying to make the world a bit better. Agency funding a project to monitor online information about Fukushima crisis. Around-the-clock monitoring of blogs of nuclear power and Twitter accounts. TEPCO has worked vigilantly to shut out close scrutiny of the ravaged plant's conditions. Tokyo Vice Governor suggested a Fukushima draft. We all of Japanese must face it. And the sale of foreign Geiger counters were banned. So they had said there was a release came out, or there were some of the papers that got released. There was 4 million emails got released, right? And I'll link to that down below in my description all the time. But some of those releases was everybody 60 and older should be prepared to die at the Fukushima broken plant. So why would you have nuclear power plant? Because if it breaks down, everybody 60 and older should be prepared to die. Do you get any idea how stupid this whole story is? And a Fukushima draft? You're going to send people into the nuclear wasteland? Well, nuclear scientists won't go there. Nuclear academics are not going to go there. It's only the homeless and the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language. I'm not going nowhere. I'm going to war every day I wake up against this industry. And I'm going to stay at war forever. Because my videos will never go away. YouTube might take them down, but my videos would never go away. They're always aggregated somewhere else, right? Lots of people download it. It's never going to go away. Yellow radioactive substance in the neighborhood near Tokyo. I saw the roofs of other houses. Most of them were covered with incredible radioactive. We're talking about 10 million atoms per kilogram. More than 8,000 kilometers of Japan contaminated with cesium. Size may increase in the future. Oh no. The whole country, the whole planet was covered in this stuff. And it still is. It never goes away. 20,000 square kilometers. Would be evacuated if Japan followed a lot of illegal radioactive waste, 20 times larger than a no-go zone. All of Japan is contaminated. I really disrespect Gunnarsson for doing what he done. Let me play a clip of it, because I shouldn't say stuff about something unless I can back it up with documentation, right? Fair is only fair. I mean, the whole industry shits on me, makes up lies about it, like, literally, because that's all they can do. Because I'm not a bad person, so they have to make up lies about me. They got no problem with that whatsoever. They're quite... Let me try this again. I screwed up. They have no problem telling lies about me or anybody else. Any dissenting voices are to be attacked relentlessly and perpetually. That's how this industry works. Oh, I know what I got done here. I'm going to play a little clip of Arnie Gunnarsson in a moment. Just so you can understand why I say that he shouldn't be trusted. Like, he was put on a pedestal to lull you into listening to him. He talks very calm. He's got lots of money, got a big organization. His wife was a pro-nuclear spokesperson for 20 years, for over 2 decades. This is Arnie Gunnarsson. Now, he made the assemblies for the fuel pools, or the racks for the assemblies. The assemblies are the fuel rods from the reactor cores.
Unit 4 was damaged twice. It was damaged by all of the earthquakes that occurred, and it was also damaged by a series of explosions over the first week or two of the accident. So the building is structurally weakened. Now, Tokyo Electric's acknowledged that. They went in May and June of last year. This is more than a year ago, and put an enormous number of extra structural supports directly under the fuel pool to keep the bottom of the pool from breaking through.
So, first off, there's nobody going to go under the building of a nuclear meltdown. And the fuel pool would be 150 feet above the stump of Reactor 4. So the fuel pools are up here. I put his picture up where his video where the fuel pool is to. The bottom of the building is over there. There's nothing left to the building. And he had the incredible arrogance to come out and say what he just said, where they're putting structural supports under a fuel pool that doesn't exist. That was gone on day 4. And right alongside of it was a Medusa, Reactor 3. And what was really interesting about that is that he was quoted in these stories. If you went under these videos, you can still find it today. You go back and look up these stories at CNN, ABC Australia, Cecilia Vega, BBC Rupert Winfield Hayes, CBS Seth Dorn, a senator's son no less. This is just a fraction of the media claiming they're in the fuel pool of Fukushima Reactor 4 over there. And Arnie Gunnarsson was usually, and many times in the videos, as part of the videos, or in the story itself. It's saying it's like a crushed pack of sugar. Japan must be the only place in the world with several million atoms of radioactive isotopes in urban areas, and comparable highly radioactive blue algae on school routes. So I've showed you an overwhelming, an absurd amount of documentation tonight. So this is a great show. These are the best shows. And so my videos with the lowest numbers, they're usually the best shows, right? They censor me. They have people sitting on me 24 hours a day censoring everything. I know that might sound crazy to some people, but if you know this industry, you know that's normal. You got $1 billion industry out there with no one to pick on. So they're gonna go overboard with it. Japan radiation expert, my results show contamination is spread over the entire country. This was an interesting one. TEPCO. Radioactive substances from Fukushima belong to the landowners, not us. So if your property is incredibly radioactive, it belongs to you. So go ahead and make a dirty bomb out of it and send it to TEPCO, okay? TEPCO, the people who deserve your hate the most. Oh, guess what that is? A zippity doo a die day 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 do blah blah 290 counts per minute on my giggity counter up there. Great. The colder the weather, the bigger the numbers, right? The more moisture the air holds, so the more radiation it can hold. I forgot to mention last night, Kevin Gibbs donated $30, and James Lucid unbelievably donated another $300. And so that's a big deal. That was a big deal for me. And this is the end of the show. I guess, basically. Let me see what else I didn't cover. It's a brutal job because the censorship, right? You're trying to do something good for everybody, including the scumbags, and they take great pleasure in censoring you because that's what they get paid the big bucks to do, to be scumbags, and that's the only thing they're really good at. Let me clean out the stuff we done tonight. So we finally got through all that. So we never got to the links I got below. We never got to any of them stories tonight because we're still cleaning up from last night's show. So it's madness trying to do these shows sometimes, because you know, like what happened was I forget sometimes how much I got left over from a previous show that I really want to get through, and so the next night, because you can't, I got a tendency to put too much in my shows because it's important, and you're trying to cover as much. You can only cover a fraction of the lies every day. You're trying to do the best you can. And so I don't worry about it. I just go ahead and do the best I can. That's good enough. That's all I can do. We got pounded tonight in censorship again, did we? Brutalized again. 21 likes up. You had 25 votes. But only 21 likes? My goodness. We only got 22 wonderful people on my show, really, that I've been doing for over a decade. Non-stop for over a decade. Not much can cheer me up. Maybe James got a new song up. That'll cheer me up. Oh. Yes, I think it's so. I gotta see it on the big screen. Ha ha. Oh. James got a new song. We're going to hit that one right now. That's a win. That makes life a bit better. And James, he's got over 260 anti-nuclear songs now. He does all the videos, all the music. And we're going to come back and close the poll down. I'll close the poll down after. I'll see everybody hopefully tomorrow night. I'm pretty busted up tonight. I'm not I couldn't sleep. I wanted to get a nap in before the show, but I was so frigged up I couldn't get a nap in. I'm in good spirits though, so who knows? We might get a show tomorrow night. That's the plan anyways, to do a show tomorrow night. I'll catch you on the other side. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. If you can donate, you'll find links in the bottom of the description. There's 2 ways to donate. We've never had a problem. The only problem is we don't have enough people helping, and hopefully that'll change one day so I can put a proper beating on this disgusting industry. I'm going to stop it and make sure it's in 1080 tonight though, so just ignore the first part here. I'll restart that. I just wanted to make sure, because it's only in 360, right? I want to put it in 1080. We'll see you on the next side. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody.
Needs the grid just to survive. Can't stand up, can't stay alive. Drains too fast, burns too high. Won't sustain, so tell me why. Cooling breaks, backup dies. Locked in place, can't stabilize. If it fails when left alone, how's it gonna fuel my code? Nuclear fails, drains too fast. Can't sustain, it won't last. Needs more power just to stay. How's it gonna run AI? Every spark, every loop needs a line just to reboot. Fail-safe trips, strain remains. Fails the load, can't sustain.